Just a background on the Office of Justice programs and the task forces that I represent. We have 23 state-funded task forces that cover 63 counties, most of the state, and a large number of cities. They use both state and federal monies to form violent crime enforcement teams throughout this state. They focus on drug enforcement, gang enforcement, and other violent crimes. Some 2012 statistics is the task forces conducted in excess of 7,000 investigations with over 3,900 arrests, 84% of those for felony level crimes. They seized thousands of grams of heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, marijuana, and other drugs and substances similar to these synthetics. Over half of the VSETs have reported a dramatic increase in synthetic cathinones and synthetic cannabinoids investigations and seizures over the past year, and that has remained. We are not seeing, some of the task forces are reporting zero. I'm going to cover some of this very fast because it's been covered by the other two presenters already. Synthetic cathinones, they aren't traditional bath salts. They're a central nervous system stimulant. It reacts in the body that way, and they're marketed as bath salts or plant food to avoid regulation. The age range of users that the task forces are seeing varies up to 60 years old, but it's most popular among the teens and young adults that they have seen. It is commonly found in powder and crystal form, white to light brown color, and it's sold in packages of 50 milligrams to 500 milligrams and labeled not for human consumption, once again to get around the regulations. Sold for $25 to $75 a packet and is available over the internet or in these shops. The effects reported to me from the law enforcement people, the highs are similar to cocaine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, or LSD. Psychosis and suicidal, it is not known what the long-term effects are. I know the doctors that testified up in Duluth said they really are unclear what the long-term effects to a body are going to be. Task forces that report to me say the use of tasers or pepper spray on people that are high on this doesn't seem to affect them. And they seem to have superhuman strength when they're trying to subdue them. And DEA has cited it as an immediate, imminent threat to public safety. Some of the most common ingestion methods is it's snorted like a cocaine or a methamphetamine. It can also be injected or smoked. Some of the signs and symptoms that are being reported from the street, probably the most popular one, or the biggest one that they're seeing, is agitation or extreme anxiety. Most of the people that they're encountering because of police calls is because of that. The extreme paranoia and hallucinations is number two, and I know from the doctors up in Duluth and talking to the officers that seems to be the number one complaint that gets called into law enforcement is when someone is having these hallucinations. The violent behavior, chest pain, high blood pressure, sweating, and tremors or seizures. Some of the examples similar to what Violet had, blue silk, vanilla sky, ivory soft. Ivory soft happens to be the label that I had picked with the disclaimer that is put on it when it's sold. It's a violation of federal law to use this product inconsistent with its labeling. Synthetic cannabinoids, this is not marijuana. It is 4 to 100 times more potent than marijuana. The people that are on it are not reacting the same when law enforcement encounters them. It's a mixture of plant material sprayed with potent psychotropic drugs. It's often contaminated with the unidentified toxic substances. So as you heard Dr. Weiberg testify, number one, they don't know what their dose is that they're using, but number two, they truly don't know what's in it. And it is most commonly labeled as incense, marked not for human consumption. That is sold in 3 to 15 gram packages for $15 to $45, and it is most commonly smoked. The users have reported hallucinogenic effects that are similar to PCP. The effects: numbness and tingling, seizures and tremors, hallucinations are probably the number one reported effect that people are having with it, and once again the long-term effects are unknown. With both law enforcement, with both these substances, law enforcement has seen a dramatic increase in assaultive behavior towards law enforcement and others, an increase in medical and suicidal calls, and driving accidents or driving complaints, and just general public nuisance calls. I know in the chairman's district in Duluth, the number of nuisance type calls in that one district where that head shop is accounts for a large majority of the police calls in the city of Duluth, or a very high number compared to the size of the district. Some of the product names for synthetic cannabinoids that are out there: K2, Scooby Snack, King Kong, Spice, Diamond, Smoke, Yucatan Fire. Most of these you can find on the internet for sale. The background: in 2010 and 11, the task force has started to see synthetics becoming popular in Minnesota. Office of Justice Programs was not keeping track of the numbers at that point, but they were seeing an increased number of reports from poison control centers, hospitals, and law enforcement. In 2012, the University of Maryland study reported that synthetic cannabinoids were the third most used substance by U.S. Students in grades 9 through 12. Back to that education part of, we need to get the word out to these people that it is not marijuana, it is not safe, to bring that number down. The Minnesota Student Survey did not have this as a question in 2012, but it was recently added, that will be asking for synthetic drug use among 9th through 12th graders in Minnesota. In 2012, the Office of Justice Programs began collecting data. So in the all of 2012, the task forces combined seized or purchased a total of 5,020 grams. In the first quarter of 2013, they seized or purchased 52,000 grams. The second quarter was a projection from data I had received from the task force commanders, and I can tell you that those projections are off the chart. We have to move the second quarter 2013 to 500,000 grams. So the projection for CY 2013, I don't have one now. Since we were so far off on our numbers, I can't tell you what that number is going to be. I know of one case in particular with the task force where they seized almost 500,000 grams of substance in one case. They had a packaging business set up. It was a residence that had been converted over for manufacture. So they had in excess of 400 pounds of the green leafy substance they started with. They had multiple gallons of the material to spray on it, and they had a packaging machine set up that had already turned out 130,000 packages with an additional 480 pounds to process. Some of the challenges that the task forces are seeing, obviously, is the seller's portrayal of synthetic substances as legal and or not harmful. When they start their investigations, they need to, or typically will start their investigations by going in or sending a cooperator into a store and try to purchase some of it. They then have to wait for the laboratory to come back with an analysis to figure out if it fits into a statute, to figure out if they can get a search warrant to proceed any further. The bizarre and unpredictable behavior exhibited by users isn't just from the task forces. This is from all of the public. When citizens of Duluth don't want to walk down the street because they're afraid for their own safety, but also the patrol officers that are getting called on all of these very unusual, bizarre behavior type calls. The increase in lab analysis, you heard from Ms. Stevens about the additional resources that it takes to determine even if the substance is controlled by one of our laws. and the difficulty for state and federal legislation to keep up with the changing chemical compositions. County attorney's difficulty in determining charges under the analog statute, once again waiting for the substance to be tested, and then determining if they can find an expert that can testify in court, and how much that's going to cost for the counties. I know recently Roseau County was the first successful prosecution that I'm aware of the analog statute, and they were lucky enough to come up with a pharmacist from the University of North Dakota that testified in that case. Some of the response and training from the task forces, they continue to coordinate with each other, with the state and federal agencies to address synthetics. The Office of Justice Programs, we have provided synthetics trainings at the last two Minnesota State Association Narcotics conferences. The task force personnel regularly conduct narcotics presentations to community groups, law enforcement, and government entities that include synthetics or whatever new topic happens to be rising at the time. They try to get to community groups, schools, and to their patrol partners that can then further that message on to the public. Cities enacting local ordinances. I know in Moorhead they were successful in adopting a paraphernalia ordinance that took care of some of their problems there. Something similar for the state may be a possibility to look at theirs. Their ordinance has already been tested and gone through federal court. The Violent Crime Coordinating Council has begun an ad hoc committee on synthetics that has their first meeting, I believe, in about a week. And they are also part of the statewide substance abuse strategy, which has identified synthetic drug abuse as an emerging issue. I know we've been to several meetings with the Department of Health and DHS trying to figure out how we can come to common ground on these issues. Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's all I have.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm sure we have a few questions. Representative Ward, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marquardt, first of all, congratulations on your new job as being recently selected, and rightfully so. You know, one of the things that I have my question is, you know, we have a problem that we all know in Duluth, and Representative Marquardt, Mr. Marquardt, you are familiar with the Brainerd area as well, as you live up in that area. And we have Winona, we have some stuff up on the range. You know, I don't hear of the Metro having this. Is there a reason for that? Do you have any, you know, yeah, is there suggestions or your hypothetical reasons?
They are here. The task forces in the metropolitan area are reporting. They are seeing. Okay. I cannot explain to you why it's not as big of an issue or isn't rising to that level as it is in Brainerd or Duluth. But one of the metropolitan task forces is the one that I was speaking of, where they seized the 500,000 gram.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ward.
You know, and a lot of our members, you know, we have heard significant testimony a lot of times about, you know, how can we tackle this issue either chemically or pharmaceutically, or and it's difficult because, you know, it's like we do something and then they do something, or, you know, it's like a chess game, and it's frustrating. But Mr. Marquardt, can you or will you share with the rest of the committee the business in Brainerd, risky business is the business that I'm talking about? The operator there, like Mr. Carlson in Duluth, is now in jail or prison. He's doing some time, and I would like the community to hear how, in fact, if you can, and I don't know if you can, how in fact that owner was placed in prison for a while. Anyhow, can you do that?
Mr. Marquardt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, I am familiar with that case. I don't know all of the details, but it ended up being a tax evasion that he was sentenced to jail on, or to prison on. I know that the task force there had purchased many times from that shop, had submitted evidence to the BCA laboratory, had executed search warrant and seized numerous substances, some of which were controlled, some of which weren't.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Marquardt. And members, while we try to rack our brains about trying to come up with a solution, there are other perhaps ways that are on the books, on the statutes, that have nothing to do with their business, with the sale of chemicals or synthetics or whatever. So, I just state that because maybe that's something that, as we move forward with this, we can also remember is that there are other ways or other means and methods to at least try to make a dent in this problem. So thank you.
Representative Ward, is that business still open in Brainerd?
Mr. Chair, it is still open while he is serving his time. And I don't know if the impact on the synthetics. I just talked to the Baxter chief and the Brainerd chief and the sheriff yesterday about this committee meeting, and I'm not sure that there's been an impact on the sale, but I think there has been as he's sitting his time right now. But the business is open.
Thank you. Representative Schoen.
Mr. Chair, and congratulations as well. I didn't realize that you had finally got the job. So would you, maybe you could let us know, but are you doing a lot of communication to the task forces, especially out to the agencies? Because what would be helpful to us, and when we talk about not seeing the epidemic in the metro area, I think some of that has to do with just the spread out population, because I know when we're working, you could find this stuff daily. It just comes down to the point where there was so much frustration of seeing us talk about it year after year at the legislature, and then getting back out to the street as law enforcement, and why are we even grabbing this stuff and wasting our time when we should be out doing something else when it's not going to get prosecuted anyway. So now that we start to see successful prosecutions, I think those stories and then exactly how they arrived at making that happen is going to be very important to get even out to the patrol officers, much less beyond or just the task force as well. And so I hope you guys will work on that. I assume you are, because you guys are really good about sharing information, but I think it's important for the public to know that some of this is here, but it just has to do with some of the background on how it's been handled as far as prosecution and the ability to do so. And that's not a slam on prosecutors or the courts. It's just about making sure that things are shored up and finding the way that it worked. And if you said we had one in Roseau, a successful prosecution, congratulations to them, because they obviously went the extra step that a lot of us haven't taken in law enforcement and in the court system and as far as prosecution goes, and just were dogged and determined to get it done. So hopefully continue the information sharing. That's going to be a big deal in continuing this and making it better.
Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marquardt, a brief question here. Is there an organized crime or a gang element in this equation? Is this part of the issue as far as the manufacture and the distribution, or is this more individual operations? What's your gut feeling on that?
Mr. Marquardt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that OGP does track gang data, and I have talked with a lot of the task force commanders that have done these synthetic cases around the state, and as far as I have been told, they have not found any connection similar to that. That doesn't say that it doesn't exist, just that they have not been able to uncover anything like that.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate that. Thank you. Next, we have representatives from the Winona County Attorney's Office. Actually, not just representatives, we actually have the Winona County Attorney, don't we not?
That's correct.
Welcome to the committee, and if you could
Thank you.
both identify yourselves for the record, and feel free to go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and staff, my name's Karen Sonneman, and I'm the Winona County Attorney. And I'll let Ms. Davenport introduce herself.
Chair, representatives, my name is Christina Davenport. I'm an assistant Winona County attorney.
And we're doing the tag team, I guess, testimony today, partly because Ms. Davenport and I have put on a CLE about synthetic drugs and the experience that we've had in Winona County, which really started in the summer of 2010 before I became county attorney. But Ms. Davenport was working in our office at the time with the Rural Drug Task Force that was funded through a federal grant at that time, and now the county, Winona County, has funded positions both in our office and in law enforcement to continue that really important work of rural drug crime task force. But we've brought with us today a copy of that PowerPoint that Ms. Davenport is the main author of that. She's just a wonderful, I would call, expert on this subject. So we've provided that to you in the materials. We also have a written statement there, which is our historical experience up basically through March of 2013 when we last gave that presentation. So I'm not going to go line by line, obviously, through that. That's why we provided those to you. And we also have our wish list, and finally, because we're lawyers and we're testifying, we want to make sure we have our curriculum vitae for you. So the total package. But I'll be giving a short overview of our experience in Winona County and what we've done to address the problems, how it's affected our resources, our local community resources, the lives of our community members. And then Christina, Ms. Davenport, will give specifics as to the effect on prosecution. I know there were some questions about, well, how is this affecting local prosecution? And she can answer those, and I'll try to do as well. And ultimately, I think our suggestions are probably the same as what you've heard this morning. We were here to hear that because it's all about sharing information and collaborating and working together. And so I would say to resolve this issue, or at least address it and moving forward, is to collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And it is a public health problem. It is a law enforcement problem. It's a prosecution problem. It's a community problem. And we've been in the trenches since 2010. As I said, August of 2010 was when it first really started to appear. But in September, we actually had arrested, in September of 2010, a person had been picked up with a substance that was labeled white gold plant food not for human consumption. And no charges could be brought because there was no charge, no law to prosecute. So that had to be dismissed. And there was another fight later that fall. Our PowerPoint presentation, which we can provide to the committee online as well, but we titled it Werewolves, Shadows, and Demons, My What a High. And that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but that's really what was happening. People were thinking that they were being attacked by werewolves, being tortured by demons. And in Winona County, we saw just an increasing number of this, and we did ring in the new year of 2011 with just an extraordinary increase in the amount of admissions to the hospital, taxing the resources of our local medical community, people exhibiting signs of mental illness but not having ever been diagnosed. Our law enforcement was powerless really to do anything about it other than to take people to the hospital, and were asking us as prosecutors, well, why aren't you charging these things? We saw an increase in the amount of Rule 20s being asked by defense attorneys, as well as our own concern as prosecutors about people's mental status. from this. So we reached out to our colleagues in the prosecutor community through the Minnesota County Attorneys Association and to probation agents, to law enforcement, asking if they'd seen the same thing that we were seeing in Winona County back in 2010, 2011, and people were like, what are you talking about? So, and I know you've all heard this before because the legislature did respond, and we thank you for that. We talked to our local legislators and with our examples of the calls to law enforcement, the health care admissions, the problems that we were seeing in juvenile delinquency. In juvenile court, children were coming in under the influence of synthetics because they thought that they could avoid the testing by their probation agents in many cases because none of the tests tested for this and it wasn't an illegal substance. So I've been in this line of work for over almost 30 years now, and I had never seen so many Rule 20s for juvenile kids being asked at that time. So, and then the collateral effects of synthetic drug abuse and use were incredible. The child protection cases we saw in Winona County increased about 75%, allegations involving both or one of the parents. And in our PowerPoint pictures and slides there, we have some truly devastating and emotionally kind of wrenching examples of what parents were doing, basically abandoning their children. One in particular that really got to me was kids, or a mother who thought her children were dead and was running through a local cemetery looking for their graves. So we had a major problem. And as I said, the collateral expenses were incredible, the collateral effects, child protection cases going up, admissions to our hospital, law enforcement with their hands tied, our office with our hands tied. The good news is that the laws that were crafted and adopted did make a difference. As of July 2012, we didn't see as many or in fact no new CHIPS cases involving plant foods. We're finally seeing some of those original CHIPS cases from 2010. People are getting back on their feet. In fact, one of my other assistant county attorneys said to me yesterday, did I remember so-and-so? She looked really good now. She's about to get her kids back, but she was a huge user of synthetic drugs. As I just said in my opening remarks, what we did to address this problem was go to you and ask for help, and you responded, and thank you for that. And we appreciate being here today to ask for, or to allow us to give you our recommendations on what to do in addition. We've been doing stuff at the local level already. What's been discussed now about public education outreach, that's incredibly important, and we've been putting on seminars and forums. Ms. Davenport's gone out with our local law enforcement, our community liaison officer. I've gone out, multiple members of our office, and we have a wonderful organization in Winona County called the Winona County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which brings together all of the stakeholders, especially ones that need to address this problem, including public health, including Department of Human Service folks, social workers. But we've gone out and done community education and outreach to school children. I don't think we've gone to the elementaries yet, but we've gone to kids as young as the middle school ages, 5 in our community, 5 to 8th grade. We've had seminars for seniors and college students, and that's, I think, made a big difference. Parents were just, they wanted help. They didn't want their kids to start using these drugs. But we do need help with the costs of this, because at the prosecutor level, what funds our office is our county board, and they've been very generous, I would say, at this point. But the spigot gets turned off after a while. We also have benefited from and are very thankful for the grants we've received from the Office of Justice Programs here at the state and also the feds. But it is about working together. So I'm going to now turn now to Christina Davenport here to give you from the real trenches. Christina is our dedicated prosecutor pretty much on controlled substance prosecution. So Christina, go for it.
Mr. Chair, representatives, thank you again for having us here. I just want to start by saying that we have had synthetic cannabinoids in Winona County. We've actually had people manufacturing them as well as just using them. But really what we're here to talk about today are the bath salts and how that has been a huge devastation to our community and the effects that we've seen. And it's really what I, as a prosecutor, look to in referring to these substances is what they call them on the street. So it could be anything from plant food to bath salts, and a newer form of what they refer to it as is turbo. A lot of times users don't actually know what they're using, so they use the terms interchangeably. But then, of course, I, as a prosecutor, have to know what the chemical composition is and how that all fits in together. Really, what we've seen chronologically over time is in late 2010, we first saw mephedrone, and then gradually it transitioned to having more MDPV, and now primarily what we're seeing is the alpha PDP. One of the individuals I just spoke with last week, he's very highly educated, but there's still a misconception in the community that people are really just going to Walmart, picking up a bottle of Miracle Grow and somehow ingesting it, and that's the plant food that we're dealing with. So even though we have made strides towards educating our community, there's still a huge gap of knowledge in what is actually going on. So we've had some rumors that plant food has been manufactured in individuals' garages, but we haven't actually found evidence of that. What we've seen is that people are ordering these substances online, usually from China, and having them shipped in. We've had a lot of discussion about what the substances look at, but I just want to compare what the plant food looks like compared to what are other controlled substances to show how it was difficult for us, especially when these substances first came out, in terms of identifying them. They're white, powdery substances that often appear very similar to cocaine. We've seen them vary from being white to tan, and sometimes we haven't actually seen this in our investigations, but what we've heard from treatment counselors is that the youth will dye them neon colors, whether it's the youth or the people selling to them, just so it's more attractive for young users and that they find it more appealing to try these substances. Initially, as County Attorney Sonneman mentioned, we did see the white gold plant food label and the not for human consumption label, but really that was very short-lived, and eventually they just became packaged in baggies like you would see any other controlled substance. One other packaging that we're seeing very commonly is just little round plastic containers like you could buy to put cosmetics in, and that's usually correlated to the synthetics. There's various ways that it can be used. As was mentioned before, it can be snorted or used with crack, with pipes like you would for crack. But two of the things that we're seeing really most commonly, one from the beginning has been the use of syringes, which creates a whole other public safety risk because you have individuals sharing needles, you have people disposing of needles improperly, and you also have law enforcement who are conducting searches who then could be subject to pricking themselves with the needles. The one that develops a little bit more over time is basically painting the substance onto tinfoil, and then they would use it like you would a foil, where you have your lighter and you burn with the lighter underneath the foil and then you inhale the fumes. What we've been seeing recently is that these substances are sold by the point, so it's 1/10 of a gram, and that does contrast with cocaine and methamphetamine, where they're usually sold by the gram. It sells for about $30 a point, so that's $300 a gram, and an investigator told me that that really is similar to what we would see in heroin sales. So right now the street value of these substances is very high. Users consider plant food more potent than methamphetamine and cocaine. One example is law enforcement had someone that they knew to be a lifetime methamphetamine user come to them with a substance, and he wanted to know what he had taken because the person had sold it to him as methamphetamine, but what he actually experienced when he ingested that substance was so much more severe, and he wanted to know what he had taken afterwards. Another person had expressed concerns to law enforcement about he did not want his children to be using any of the plant food substances, yet he himself had his own addiction issues, and shortly after that was found in the street high on plant food. So even though individuals can have the knowledge of it, it still has that effect on them where they're still going to ingest it. I'm told that the average person can get high on a point of methamphetamine, on synthetics. But one user stated that she had been using them for so long that now it does take her a full gram. So it can kind of range, but typically they're looking at a point will get someone high. Right now, methamphetamine in Winona County is actually cheaper, and so investigators have seen people cutting their synthetics with methamphetamine. And I did appreciate the testimony earlier this morning, really addressing these as designer synthetic drugs. Typically, we just shorten it to synthetic drugs is how most people use it, but the real issue that we need to address is that people are designing these substances, just changing the chemical composition to get around the laws. But I do agree that it will be an ongoing challenge for us. So really, where we saw the biggest impacts in the community was before the substances were illegal. We saw people with very strange behaviors thinking that werewolves were chasing them. We had people just shooting out into the dark, into their yards, because they saw a shadowy figure. We had people who believed that there were demons in their home, and specifically demons in their cat. And so they cut up their cat and chased her around the house, and then they broke open the TV. And fortunately, it was only the cat who was hurt in that instant. Someone else thought that they were being chased by someone with a gun, and so they wanted to get in the back of the squad car as fast as possible because they thought that that's where they would be safe. Another individual put a cell phone up her vagina, and then when the doctor in the emergency room was trying to help her, she bit the doctor. So often at this point in time, it would have been the users themselves who were calling into law enforcement wanting help because they were scared of the hallucinations that they were having. They would call for the police, but the police, of course, couldn't arrest them because we didn't have enough to believe at that point in time it was criminal conduct. So usually what would happen is they would be taken to the hospital. But then you also had the reverse. You had people going to the hospital, and once they were at the hospital, then they would have that unruly behavior, and then they would need to call law enforcement. So it was just kind of a big cycle. And really, we didn't know what to do with them at that point in time. We had issues with identifying the substances at first. We had to look for field tests because initially the substances were field testing positive as cocaine. It appeared like cocaine. It was often packaged like cocaine. And so then we had to develop our own method of figuring out, what actually is cocaine that we can go ahead and charge, and what do we need to wait to see whether or not it's a synthetic or it is in fact cocaine. So we were seeing this immense public safety risk, yet there's no legal remedy. And so the best that we could really do was we had some creative judges people who were already on probation, once they were coming in for violations, then they would modify their conditions to include not using any mood-altering substances. But in terms of new offenses, there wasn't a lot that we could do with that, and the offenders really became proud that they could be out there using these substances and we couldn't do anything about it. And again, then we did see the initial change in the legislation, and that was a huge help because finally we could have a legal response. There could be an immediate intervention. But despite those changes, we do still see some remaining challenges. On the surface, if you look at Winona County, it would seem like things are really great now, that we don't have as many phone calls, we don't hear as many stories in the newspaper about the werewolves and the demons and the shadows. But really what's happened is because now that it is illegal, people are much more secretive about their use. They don't come forward to law enforcement. And at least of the complaints that I've heard about where people have reached out to law enforcement, it's usually the children who are reaching out to law enforcement. We've had children calling 911 to have someone come and check on their mom because she's displaying suicidal tendencies, and the other information that they would provide to law enforcement would be indicative of synthetic drug use. We have reports of children who are being bitten or having knives put up to their throats, and the other information that they give is consistent with synthetic drug use. So the danger really is still there. It's just that it's not being flaunted in the way that it was before. So while it's immensely beneficial to have some means to intervene, the statutes still do not accurately reflect the devastating effect that we've seen on our community. Essentially, the way the law is right now, the highest that you could get for, I'll just refer to all of them generally as plant food. For a plant food sale would be a 4th degree, and for a possession would be a 5th degree, and that is regardless of amount. So we have a current example, or current case that really demonstrates this well. It's one that is from May 31st of 2013, so it still is a pending case. The person had purchased alpha PVP online from China, and we were able to intercept it with the U.S. Postal Inspector with their assistance, and specifically this individual had purchased over 124 grams of alpha PVP from China. So again, it's sold by the point, and for the average user, they can get high on the point, and it takes, so essentially with 124 grams, you could have 1,240 people who would be able to get high from what this person purchased. And just, I use this for the judges in the bail argument, but that would be essentially half of our on-campus students at Winona State University, or about the size of one of our towns called Lewiston. It is a smaller town. But it still would have the ability to get a lot of people high. So on that offense, all that I was able to charge him with would be a 4th degree intent to sell. He is a known drug user drug user and dealer in the community, but up until recently he's been pretty careful, so he doesn't have much of a criminal history. So when you look at his criminal history and a 4th degree, he's looking at basically a period of probation for about 15 months. After they intercepted this package and did their controlled delivery, they did do a search warrant on his home. So in order to contract that 4th degree offense, once they conducted the search at his house, they found 10 grams of methamphetamine, and there was evidence to support intent to sell. So I did charge him with a 1st degree intent to sell methamphetamine, and that offense itself would give him a middle-of-the-box guideline sentence of a 98-month executed sentence. So there really is a disparity between that 124 grams and that 10 grams, even though what we see in our community is an equally devastating effect. Then just to kind of take a look at kind of our numbers in Winona County, we're still in the process of gathering some of our data in our current caseloads. So I reached out to the Southeast Minnesota Narcotic and Gang Task Force. Agencies that are involved there, the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, the Winona County Sheriff's Office, the Winona Police Department, the Goodhue County Sheriff's Office, the Red Wing Police Department, the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, Casson Police Department, Mower County Sheriff's Office, Austin Police Department, the Fillmore County Sheriff's Office, Houston County Sheriff's Office, and the Wabasha County Sheriff's Office. In each of those agencies in their communities, they do see the synthetic drugs, but really Winona is the one that's had the highest numbers of the region. And the numbers that they gave me, I don't know exactly how they're calculated, and I would point out that, because I will talk about the number of people who were arrested, but ultimately in drug investigations you do need to do controlled buys, which means that sometimes your offenders will become an informant, so those numbers won't necessarily be included in here. In 2012, a total of 327 grams was seized seized, 37 grams were purchased, and 14 individuals were arrested. And for 2013, the second quarter has not yet been completed. Their reporting period, I believe, ends tomorrow. But what they've seen so far is that already in 2013, the numbers are up quite a bit. The 124-gram case would not be in there yet, and I think they have some current investigations right now that are looking at some very large numbers. But if we just compare the first quarters of 2012 to 2013, in the first quarter of 2012, they seized 2 grams and purchased 10 grams and arrested 2 individuals, whereas the first quarter this year, they seized 8.5 grams, purchased 4.3 grams, and arrested 9 individuals. And one other comment I see from the task force is that kind of what they're starting to see is that given the cost and the serious effects of plant food, some people appear to be going back to methamphetamine use just because they see that as a benefit. So in conclusion, in addition to the problems that the testing that we have and really having to stay ahead of whatever substances people come up with next to try and evade the law, the real problem is that we don't know the long-term effects, which has been discussed earlier. The substances are new, so there's no studies, but what we've seen from the immediate effects is that they are severe. We believe that the designer synthetic substances are even more harmful to our communities than methamphetamine. We've seen violence from the results of it, often because of the hallucinations, during which people believe they're being attacked and need to fight back. In their reality, there's werewolves and demons, but those things really aren't there. Again, if we look at our case where the individual just shot out into the dark because they saw shadows, we really are fortunate that an officer wasn't responding at that time, because easily that would be suspicious behavior at the least, or disruptive. We're lucky that some neighbor wasn't walking his dog, or that some child was running on the street going home. So we have been fortunate in that regard. But given all of our experiences, today we do respectfully request that this committee look at changing the language in Chapter 152. At a minimum, we would ask that methadone, MDPV, and alpha PDP, which is, I'll refer you to the chart on page 2 of the historical outline. Alpha PDP is really in that class of the substituted 2,1 aminopropane. I always have to look at it to say it right. A substituted 2-aminopropan 1,1. At a minimum, making those 3 substances a narcotic drug, because that would give us the ability to actually have some more consequences in these offenses. But what we would really like to see is to also see those substances listed in statute along with everywhere that methamphetamine is listed, because we really have seen it being very comparable to methamphetamine. So we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there questions from members? Representative Lomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That was very interesting testimony. I'm just curious, are there any head shops now in Winona, or have they mostly gone away since these laws? Or?
There's some, I guess you'd call them, I wouldn't say drug paraphernalia because that's illegal, but yeah, some shops that but we have not seen this on the shelves. So as far as selling, I mean, we don't have the same problem that Duluth has, thank goodness, but we haven't really seen that in terms of selling. But it is, for our community, is more the bath salts, and we don't have the cannabinoids, the synthetics as much. Is that in terms of the prosecution of that? It's the bath salts, and that's what was causing, as you can see in our PowerPoint, some of the more devastating effects on folks, men, women, kids, and again, we really saw it. I mean, like I said, I've been in this business for many, many years, and I've never seen such an increase in child protection cases related to plant food or any kind of drug use like that, where parents would literally abandon their children, not care about them. So, but that's improved. But as Ms. Davenport says, people are moving to different drugs, and it's going underground. So.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Davenport, and thank you both for your testimony. As my colleague said, it's been very interesting. And your testimony raised some questions within myself about just the cost of this. I don't think that we've ever talked in this committee about what is, Ms. Davenport, what is a gram of synthetic versus a gram of meth cost? You know that?
Ms. Davenport.
Mr. Chair, Representatives, I usually defer to my drug investigators for these questions. I can tell you I don't know right now the cost of methamphetamine per gram. I can just refer you back to the fact that, I gave the number for the cost of the designer synthetics, and that's comparable to heroin, and I just know that the methamphetamine right now in Winona is cheaper. But exact numbers, I'm not certain.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Ward.
So, do you know the cost of the purchase of the? Do you know that you're prosecuting 124 grams of a synthetic? What was that cost?
Ms.
Do you know that?
Mr. Chair, Representative, what I have been told, not by someone involved in the 124-gram case, but when investigators spoke with someone else, that individual had indicated that they could purchase it for $6 a gram online, and then obviously a very significant markup for when that would be sold on the street. I'm sure it does depend on what company and shipping costs, but there is a stark contrast.
And, Mr. Chair, thank you. Maybe at a future time we can ask Mr. Marquardt that same question, maybe, and he might have some better information on that. Street value versus internet value versus retail value, that kind of question, because I know that Mr. Marquardt's going to be involved in some other of our committee meetings. But one of the, Mr. Chair, members, one of the things that I thought I heard in Duluth, and maybe it was just me thinking, but I thought I heard somebody in Duluth suggest that, and I don't even know, do we tax these things that are supposedly for sale, for legal? Does anybody know that? Is there a tax on this stuff?
Apparently it's a good question, Representative Ward.
Well, I remember the suggestion, and I thought it was a suggestion that somebody said, maybe the tax, maybe we need to look at putting a tax on these things that are, let me just say, significant. And I think that again, as I suggested before, that we have somebody in our community that owned a shop and is sitting in prison, not related related to his shop, but not become a chemical or issue. But I think that's something worth investigating as well, Mr. Chair.
It's a good point to keep in mind without question, but at the same time, I don't know that we want to place a tax on something that we really want to make illegal.
No, I understand, Mr. Chair.
It's a good point.
I understand.
We will discuss that.
I understand.
Ms. Vandenborg.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you that there is controlled substance tax stamps. They separate out marijuana values versus other controlled substances. I do have a case right now dealing with that for marijuana, so I haven't looked specifically for the designer substances, but my anticipation is that it would equally apply, and so that way you would have a drug charge that you could go forward on, as well as basically a tax evasion charge.
Any other questions for the testifiers? If not, thank you very much. Appreciate that, and this is good information and will be helpful going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members, our next testifier will be Assistant St. Louis County Attorney John Holitz. Welcome.
Thank you.
If you would please identify yourself for the tape and go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative. My name is John Holitz. I'm an Assistant St. Louis County Attorney. First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you all for taking the time to have this subcommittee and to address this very, very important topic. Thank you for having a representative from our office also. I appreciate that. County Attorney Rubin sends his regrets. I believe you should have all gotten a letter to that effect. This is one of certainly the most important issues for our office currently. It's not the only one, and unfortunately he couldn't be here due to a prior engagement. So you get me, unfortunately. But I was prepared today to outline the history and the struggle that has been St. Louis County's struggle against synthetic drugs. And I was hoping to talk to you and take you chronologically through the changes. But one of the perks, I guess, of being near the end of the presentation here and getting to listen to all the other great presenters here, particularly Ms. Stevens from the BCA, is that they've given the history. They've already done my job. The history of synthetic drugs in Minnesota is St. Louis County's history. That's Duluth's history. So I'm planning on today to narrow my focus. I want to do a little bit of chronology, but I really want to get to the two issues that Mr. Chair has asked us to address. Put it bluntly, where are we at and where are we going to go? So first of all, where are we at now? I would say we're better off than we were in July of 2011. That's thanks to you all. For me, my involvement in this in Duluth and in St. Louis County came when two community police officers came to me and said, something's going on in front of the last place on earth, which is located, for those of you who are unaware, in downtown Duluth on Superior Street, in the heart of our old downtown. They told me something's going on, people are acting weird, there are long lines of people blocking access to important businesses. It's ruining downtown. The secondary effects are crippling. What can we do? Is this stuff illegal? Can we arrest these people? How do we proceed? What we did is to treat it like you would any other drug investigation. We did some controlled buys. And what we found, we saw some of the JWH compounds that were illegal, and we saw mostly a substance AM2201. You've heard testimony about that already. We had a unique challenge that you've heard about already, which would be prosecuting under an analog theory. While we certainly could prove that the AM2201 was chemically similar, we had difficulty initially finding an expert who could testify to the effects on a human. That research just wasn't there because the product being sold, the drug being sold, was so new. We also had a unique circumstance because the U.S. Attorney's Office was interested. And so we held off and we waited. And they are prosecuting now based on an analog theory. And so that's in large part why our office was not involved, even though we had buys of specifically banned substances, the JWH substances. Just because, I just want to reiterate this, just because we didn't prosecute and we waited for the federal authorities to do so, it doesn't mean it was legal. This stuff has never been illegal. It's never been my position. It's never been our office's position that this stuff is legal. It's illegal. Everyone will tell you it's an obvious analog, but sometimes just because you don't prosecute something, some people take the opinion that it must be legal. Our office's view was, let's let the U.S. Attorney's Office go for it. If they're willing, they have the resources, and they have a bigger stick than we do. At that point, what we had for the AM2201 or the JWH was a gross misdemeanor. And that's not a big enough stick as far as we were concerned then. So the good news is, under the new legislation, we have some mixed results. In fact, I have currently 2 criminal cases pending against the defendant Carlson or defendant Gellerman for sales of bath salts out of the last place on earth store. These are the alpha PVP compound that was just talked to, but you just heard about. But I say mixed results because we also have the XLR11 still being sold, and that'd be the synthetic marijuana, which is a misnomer, but that's the product that's, again, an obvious analog, but because of the federal case, we are not pursuing it at this point. One interesting thing that I will tell you about is we were also seeing the UR144. We were seeing that frequently. That was coming back on the controlled buys. Of course, law enforcement has been doing their job and has been conducting controlled buys. We're seeing UR144, and we knew that that was set to be banned through the federal system. And we were excited, and we waited, and we figured we'd buy, and we bought the day after the ban, and guess what? The substance changed. We currently, as I said, I currently have 2 prosecutions for the sale of alpha PVP and 4-MePHP. Those are the short names. Both of these are Schedule I non-narcotic drugs. We, of course, still have challenges in our prosecution. Yesterday, I got a ruling back. There was a challenge, a motion to dismiss for lack of probable cause. The argument from the defense was that they didn't know what they were selling was illegal because they'd heard people give testimony. They've heard people in the news say, is this stuff legal, is it not? They were acting in good faith, and they were selling. The ruling from the court was denying the defendant's motion to dismiss, and so we're set for a trial. The ruling from the judge essentially said, we're going to let the citizens of St. Louis County decide whether or not you knew. But that just is to highlight and to reiterate the importance that when we talk about this, and this is the educational piece I think that others have talked about, when we speak about these substances, they are illegal. And we know that. Just because we haven't prosecuted something doesn't mean it's not illegal. So to answer the second question, where do we go in the future? I need to parrot some of what's already been said. 1, expedited rulemaking by the board. That's going to be, I think, a powerful tool. 2, public education. That's an utmost importance. And I'm certainly no expert on how to do that, but I know that other people are. 3, and this is absolutely not a criticism of our partners at the BCA, but funding for the BCA in the future to expedite testing. They've done a wonderful job with what they have, but all resources are scarce, and as we continue down this path, there's going to be more testing, and they're going to need the money. And the 4th thing is House File 1464, the synthetic lookalike. I'm watching Indiana closely to see what happens there. But here's the reason that I like it. It's because judges understand it. They understand it already. They're doing it already. And you heard that partially already from Winona County. Since 2011, everyone who goes on probation in St. Louis County gets the same admonishment from judges. And this was done without any request, without any prompting. Judges have said, you can't use drugs, you can't use alcohol. And of course, this includes synthetic drugs, bath salts, and the rest of that garbage that's sold at the last place on earth. Of course that includes it. And so it works. It'll cut down on the and I'm talking about the House file now, the synthetic lookalike. It will cut down on the initial stress on the BCA to rush to get a warrant before things change. It'll give us a course for swift action. It'll take it, I'd ask you to take it a step further. I'd ask you to mirror the penalties, to increase the penalties, such to make the drug equivalent of the caliber drug that it is. Make it similar to methamphetamine. We've heard testimony, you've heard testimony already, that this drug is worse than methamphetamine, particularly the bath salts. So let's treat it the way it's supposed to be. Let's punish it the way that it should be. Obviously, I'm reading some, and this is my own read into the proposed bill as it is, but the penalties for possession are less so than the penalties for sale. And I understand that. I think that's wise. But I would still ask that those be felony-level charges and to trust your prosecutors and judges' discretion when they charge these and when they resolve these, to take those things into account. That's what we do with other drugs. That's what we do with other drugs of this caliber, and so I'd ask that respectfully. Representative Ward said this should be chess, not checkers, and I like that. We've been playing checkers. Let's play chess. I think that House File 1464 tweaked with the penalties is a great step. We got to do that, and we have to couple that with some funding for the PCA, because if this works the way we hope it's going to, they're going to be busy, and that's what we want. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Holitz. We've got a couple questions. Representative Ward.
Thank you, I didn't, but I will.
Sorry, that was from last time.
That's okay.
You have the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, is House File 1464 yours?
Yes, it is.
And was it introduced late in the session?
Yeah, I was going to tell this story later, but essentially it was dropped late in the session, yes.
Okay, are you going to tell us a little bit about it? Because I wanted to ask Mr. Rubin a question, but...
Let me tell you about it now. It might
Okay.
make your job easier. But so last session, clearly this is something near and dear to my heart, and in my community is something that we've been dealing with for a long time. Came down here last session with the intent of trying to figure out, okay, what is it that we can do as a state to change this constant motion of reacting to changes in the statute, and spent a fair amount of time doing some research about what other states have done to try to combat this problem, and found some interesting work that was done in both Illinois and the state of Indiana. And Indiana, interestingly enough, is a lot like Minnesota, whereas they had a problem. Their legislature reacted to it, made a change in statute. Following year, they came back and they adjusted the statute again. Sounds familiar, right? And the third time came back and said, we've got to do something different here because this is not, accomplishing it at the level we'd like it to. So they passed what's commonly referred to as the lookalike ban, if you will, lookalike bill. And it essentially gets at the intent of the sales of these products, and it doesn't focus in so much on the specific ingredients, whereas if it looks like a synthetic drug and a reasonable person has a reason to believe that it's going to be used as a drug and used for somebody to get high, well, then, quite frankly, it's simply illegal. And that's a very rudimentary explanation, of course. But so we crafted a bill based on what was passed in Indiana and dropped it. It was late in the session, and really didn't have time to get a hearing together. And at that time is when I became aware that there's a lot of legislators that really didn't understand what synthetic marijuana was or synthetic drugs or what this really meant. So to try to get all of that education accomplished in a short period of time wasn't going to happen. So that's why this select committee was created, so that we could do this work over the interim and then come back in February with something really good. So if that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It helps a lot. And Mr. Rubin, you said you've been watching Indiana closely with what Mr. Chair just described. What are your reactions? What's going on in Indiana? Is it law, and has it been challenged? Is it been challenged, or what's going on?
Mr. Chair, Representative Ward, I have been watching it. It's being challenged in the court process, and that's about all I can tell you. I can tell you that the most outspoken, from what I can tell, the most outspoken opponents of it have been a group, and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but it's the group that represents the interests of people selling incense, and some of this with legitimate purpose, and some of it, of course, without legitimate purpose. So I think, obviously, Indiana is a different state than Minnesota, but I think we should watch it and learn from them as best we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question for you, Mr. Holitz. To the best of your knowledge, is the majority of these synthetic drugs, are they manufactured and packaged overseas? And in China, for instance, or Mexico, and shipped in, or is the manufacturing and the packaging process, is that more, you find that more here in the United States?
Mr. Chair and Representative, to answer your question, yes. I think what we've seen is both. Certainly, it was very public. Mr. Carlson was repackaging synthetic marijuana very publicly in his store, getting it in large quantity, repackaging it in packaging labeled specifically for his store. He had his own brand. He went as far as having his own brand, no name. This is largely the AM2201, and it was coming in large. He wasn't manufacturing, but he was repackaging to distribute. And also it's coming from other places. I don't want to, first of all, because it's an active case, I don't want to speak too much about that specifically, and also because those are probably active law enforcement investigations. I don't want to speak too much further about that.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, one more.
Representative Ward.
Sorry, on your 1464, Mr. Rubin talked about some possible change of the 1464 to increase penalties to at least have it the same level as meth, and maybe also not just sale, but possession and sale. Are those in your bill currently as that, or would that be a change in your bill?
Representative Ward, within the bill are, well, I'll just tell you what it says. Person who unlawfully sells one or more mixtures of a synthetic drug lookalike substance is guilty of a felony. Imprisonment not more than 5 years, payment more than not $10,000 or both. Now, this is like the starting point, right, of going forward, and this is kind of what we need to come together and do collectively as a group, is figure out, is this the model that we want to use? And part of that might be determined from the outcome of this Indiana case, which we think that will be concluded by, hopefully by session. You never know.
Mr. Chair, I hate to speculate.
Good point. But anyway, that's one of the things that we need to have discussions about, is if we're going to recommend a change, we also have to recommend, what the levels are that we think is right. So that'll have to be part of our discussion going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no other questions, Mr. Holt, so thank you for coming down. Always much appreciated, and good to see you.
Thank you very much.
I don't think he was offended. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to testify today? Anybody? Seeing none, let's just get into a little bit of a discussion about where we are and where we're going. So, essentially, members, our charge, and keep in mind, as a select committee, we don't have authority to take action on any bills. But our charge is to come back in February with a report to the House, which will include recommendations as to what we think should be done. And it's my goal is that we come back with a unanimous recommendation, working together on this issue, and come up with something that A, we think will work, B, we think is going to be effective, and C, most importantly, something that we can pass. Right? So our charge is to come back with this report. The two pieces that I'm really interested in is clearly the legislative change or the change in statute, but this continued reference to this public education piece is an important one to me, and I think that we should look at that. And Representative Ward mentioned, Representative Savick made some comments about some other models that are out there in terms of public education pieces that have been successful, and I think they were either in Idaho and Montana or both, and they were targeted towards methamphetamines, and they were somehow they were able to track it, and they were very successful programs. And I think everybody in here can think of examples of programs that you've seen in the past on different things, tobacco, drugs, what have you. But clearly, we should know at least by now that this needs to happen, and that we need to educate our kids that these are A, not legal, B, they're not safe, and C, really bad things are going to happen to you if you use these drugs. So I would like that to be part of our focus going forward. In addition to that, We also, because we don't have a partner committee in the Senate, I'm hoping that all of us can work with our individual senators and just kind of keep them apprised as we move forward, because when we do get to the point where we either have a bill drafted or amendments to this bill that's already in, we're going to need some Senate partners to try to get this passed on that side too. And my senator, Senator Reinert, certainly is carrying that particular bill on the Senate side, but as you all know, the more support that we have, the better off we'll be going forward. I think it's, as us as legislators, it's important to work with our local communities, and you heard a couple references here today that this is really kind of a multi-governmental approach, and I know in Duluth we've done some things with the city council and local ordinances, and we've actually got 2 new ordinances that go into effect. I think it's within the next couple of days. They were just passed, within the last 30 days. That will hopefully, put some more pressure on these retail establishments going forward, but really, that's also contained in this Attorney General's report, and I'm assuming everybody got a copy of that, right? So making sure that we communicate with our own local officials about what they can do to help too. On our committee website, there is a link to the video that I had sent out to all of you so that folks, anybody can go on there and look at this video. It's basically, for members of the public, it's a documentary that was put together by some folks up in the Duluth area, just kind of highlighting the Duluth problem, if you will. It's really interesting. Takes about 25 minutes, I think, in length, and I think at our next meeting we're actually going to show this film, so it'll be out there. But it's good, and it's good reference, and it's on our website now. So going forward, meetings. Representative Ward and I have discussed having another public hearing in the Brainerd area, just to try to, bring this process out into greater Minnesota, and B, give all of us a perspective of what's happening out in Minnesota. And I believe that date is confirmed, August 22nd, correct? And that'll be an evening meeting, 5:30 in the evening, right, or thereabouts. But more information will come out about that. But we can lock in the date as August 22nd, about 5:30 in the evening. It'll be in Brainerd, correct?
Central Lakes College.
Central Lakes College. And then, members, and again, these are just my own thoughts, but I think as we go forward from there, I'd like to come back here in September and start working on, what it is that we want to do, and just kind of roll up our sleeves and start putting our heads together and see, what do we want to do. And hopefully by then we'll have possibly a sense of what's happening in other places. We're going to have all kinds of information that'll be coming at us. Today was a really good day, I thought, in terms of just kind of setting a base. And so going forward, we'll have the August 22nd meeting, and I'm envisioning we come back here sometime later in September once school gets started and things kind of balance out a little bit. So those are kind of my thoughts, but I'd certainly entertain any comments or discussion that you all want to have at this point. Or not.
Well, I think you're on the right track with your bill, for starters. I mean, we're almost, your comment about making sure it's something that we can get passed is highly accurate, and see how much we really want to add to that. Because I've got an envision of a mini controlled substance omnibus bill, if you will. But how much do we really want to tack onto that? And what's the right heft and broad stroke that would carry? So, but that's the right direction, because there's a lot of pieces of this. I'd like to see us, when we talk about, we did the same thing in Cottage Grove too, talked about the ordinances related to the drug paraphernalia. It is what it is. I know she said we don't want to call it drug paraphernalia for Winona folks were here, because it's not, that's illegal. But that is all it gets used for. When you have a gas mask that's fashioned into a smoking device, you really don't find Marlboro marketing that. So, those are the types of things I'd like to see us move forward on, and again, there are so many other great ideas, but we need to get those ideas put on paper and find out what those challenges are, especially to the courts, if they'll withstand a court challenge. And that's going to be another big piece, too.
It is a big piece, and to that point, to Representative Schoen's point, the recommendations from the Attorney General's office, what I would like to do is have them come before our committee in September and just kind of walk through these things, because if we want to take some of these recommendations on and include them in our bill, or in our proposed legislation, I should say, I think we want to have those discussions with them early on, so that as we go forward, this thing can kind of come together naturally. But there are some things in there that, from my perspective, would be relatively easy to pass. But I know historically, for example, the legislature has been reluctant to give the Attorney General's office additional powers, so to speak. But I think there's some things that we could craft. But I would like to have them come in September and basically walk through that report and those recommendations, and then we can hit the ground from there, if that makes sense. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too I like your timeline and plan, and I think that as we have been meeting both in Duluth and here, and we've talked about a committee as well, moving forward, and every meeting that we've had on this, this legislator has learned more. No matter, and it's an evolving topic, and it's an important topic, and it's a topic that needs being addressed now. And so, as we move forward, and you said the next meeting will be in Brainerd, and members of the committee or the public that have suggestions or ideas of an area or a topic that they want to be emphasized in future meetings, I hope that they let Mr. Chair know or Laura know, and that we focus and really laser point what we're trying to do here and what we want as an outcome. So no matter where the meet, and I think it's good that we're going around. It's not the easiest thing in the world that we go around the state or whatever, but I think it's good because Winona, thank you for what you taught us today as well, and others. We had great meeting in Duluth. It was eye-opening. I mean, it was really eye-opening, and so as we go forward at each meeting, no matter where it is, and whoever it is that wants specific topics, let's get them out and about and presented and addressed and taken care of.
Good, right. Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo a little bit what Representative Ward was talking about, and I'm encouraged to see that the next meeting is going to be at a community college. When this whole topic came up, I was sitting on the couch with my daughter, who's she's a college student at one of the major universities here in Minnesota, and she asked me, she said, "What's this about?" And I told her. And I have another daughter as well who's at a different major university in Minnesota, and both of them have said that it's about time, because everyone that they know is involved with this, at least on the university level. This is a rampant problem with our college kids. So bringing it to the college environment, bringing that awareness to that environment, I think is a positive step, and I'm glad that we're doing that, and to kind of keep that in mind as a future, if we do any more future public forums, to really focus our attention there, because that's the first step in education. So her words were basically to this effect. If you were one of the kids at the university, if you weren't doing this, then you were one of the odd people out. That's how prevalent it was. So it is. So thank you.
Representative Lomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my comments are just to really thank you for doing this. I have to confess, I didn't know very much about this at all until I served on public safety, and I was so blown away by what I learned that I wanted to be part of the solution, because it is obviously, from what others are saying, it's a very, very serious problem. With the fact that I don't know a lot about it, I might not be alone with our fellow members, and as you were mentioning, that you realized a lot of people don't understand this problem, so I guess I'm just encouraging us to somehow reach out to our fellow colleagues, and I don't know how we're going to be able to share this quite the way we're getting the education that we are, but we need to do that so that they understand what we're trying to do. And I think that once they're educated, they'll know this is a very good thing to be doing, and we need to do it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yep.
Representative Schoen.
So, Mr. Chair, take my suggestion or don't. I'm thinking, as we move forward, and we've heard from the Board of Pharmacy a couple times, so if we segment this, what I'd like to see staff do, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, if it's not the right timeline. So I think we should move forward with some of these recommendations from the Board of Pharmacy and ask staff to work with them to get the language put together in a bill form and what we would do moving forward, so we can take a peek at that and start to learn what the challenges would be when we go forth in February. I mean, just as one piece to get started. And then if there's other things that we like for me, I'd like to see the paraphernalia thing. Start moving forward on that and get the language put together, Ms. Weeks, and see what we can do on working with Moorhead and the communities that have survived the federal challenges or challenges already, and see what we can do, and let's get that put into a statute language. And then we can start discussing that and seeing where our challenges are ahead of time, because we know we're going to have a shorter session and a little shorter time to act when we come back in February. But when we go to meet in September, this is stuff that we can have in front of us and go, look, we're moving forward, and these are the things that we're going to start bringing forward, and this is somewhat of a goal. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't have a problem with that. I just keep in mind that the recommendations for the Board of Pharmacy are coming from the Attorney General's office, and it would be good to hear from them. However, that doesn't prohibit us from taking their ideas and drafting them into a bill form. And they can always be changed, right?
Right, and that gives us time to modify.
So we'll take a look at that over the next weeks. And then hopefully we'll have something when we come back in September to talk about. And then we'll spend some time, too, on this lookalike bill in September when we come back. Or maybe in Brainerd, depending how the timeline goes. But okay, well, again, thank you all for coming, and appreciate the attention. And we will see you, if not before, we'll see you in August. Meeting adjourned.